we've been working on a lot of cutting-edge technologies that sort of move beyond this client desktop or client server sort of model. Preeminently our web app, but not only that, we also have business intelligence. We have an e-commerce suite for business to B2C and B2B interactions with the customers of our customers, and that uses the REST service, which is also part of the web technologies that the xTuple server is meant to address. So in short, the technology of the server is much more complicated than it used to be, and we realized that for mere mortals to be able to set it up, we would have to come up with a largely automated and sort of self-encompassing software suite that would set up the server to serve our various apps. And the xTuple server is that software suite. It's been going under the moniker of mobile because, originally we thought of this as being our the web app that runs well on mobile devices, but it's much more than just mobile. And importantly, the Qt client is a first-class client of the xTuple server. So you can think of the server as replacing what we had just thought of as the database, and now there are several different clients that can access that server. There's the Qt client, which can access it more or less the same way that it always has. There's the web client, and there are any other services in the outside world, for example, eCommerce, that access our database via the REST server. The xTuple server manages the creation of all of that. And it also manages the maintenance and the upgrade and really all of the sort of typical transactions that you would have to do to maintain our database or our server. And another big advantage of it, another thing that we are excited about in terms of its ability to make us be more scalable, is that it does provide a consistent build environment anywhere in the world for all of our customers, which I would say is an advantage really even over the previous way of doing business, where we had a lot of people set up their environments in different ways. One of the great advantages of the xTuple server is that if you're running it on the cloud, if you're running it on your own machine, it runs the same. And it also runs the same all the way from the development department to the QA in our own organization, to our operations department, and our customers are all running the exact same environment, which gives us a consistency that we expect to help us scale our software with sort of less headaches as far as individual implementation needs. One thing you should know about the xTuple server is that it is built on Ubuntu, which is a brand of Linux. Although truth be told, it does not really require any deep knowledge of Linux, and indeed, when you have a xTuple server set up on on site, you typically are going to be interacting with it through an admin console, which is web-based, and so you're really not going to have to think of it as being a Ubuntu or a Linux server. It really is an xTuple server, and we strongly recommend that the xTuple server be used only for serving the xTuple app, and not for hosting your email or anything like that. And so, insofar as it's just a dedicated bubble around around the database and around the other components needed to serve up our app, it is, I prefer to think about it not as being like an Ubuntu technology, but as an xTuple technology. And indeed, if you start with an Ubuntu box, you will have to bootstrap it to turn it into an xTuple server. And if you start with a Windows box, you'll have to sort of turn it into a Ubuntu box and then bootstrap it. In either case, we do recommend that you just take a dedicated machine and devote it in production purposes to just to serving up the ERP. Of course, for testing and demo and training purposes, we provided a VM based around a technology called Vagrant that runs in any operating system that we use heavily internally in those circumstances where 100% uptime, complete reliability, and performance are not mission critical to the life of the business. Okay, so that's a little overview of what the xTuple server, of how I approach thinking about the xTuple server. Keep in mind that it does a lot of things for you. It's a very powerful piece of software that we've been working very hard on, and it does things like tuning your Postgres, setting up permissions, installing all the different dependencies. To a large extent, all this is, in the context of the xTuple server, is sort of off your plate, which should make everyone's lives a little bit easier. And it will also, I think, make us more operationally effective, because not only do people not have to tune Postgres themselves every single time, but it allows us to propagate best practices so that all of our customers have the very best possible setup, customized to their own needs, of course. For example, tuning is different depending on the number of users that you have and the kind of mode that you're running your server in. But also means that there's going to be less variation in the way that our app is set up in the field, which I think will make everyone's lives easier. The software that we've written, similar to the way that we've set up the xTuple app, comes in open source and commercial variety. The open source xTuple server is the cornerstone of the commercial xTuple server as well, but the commercial server gives you some extra functionality that, if you're a partner or your customer, you're entitled to use the commercial functionality, and I would really recommend that you do so. Particularly, you get webmin, which is the web front end to the xTuple server. If you're running the open source version, you need to use the command line essentially to do everything. And the commercial version of the server provides a web-based front end to all of that, so you don't actually have to go in and really understand how Linux works. Keep in mind, though, that you can use a commercial server to set up a non-commercial app, and vice versa. You can use the non-commercial xTuple server to set up a manufacturing edition if you wanted to. So those two things are distinct, but they sort of follow the same general philosophy, where if you're a commercial customer, you get more not only more bells and whistles, but also just a better experience. All right. Well, before I go too much further on, I guess I'll.
Actually, I wanted to chip in here for a second, because I made a little document that helps explain some of the terminology, because I think there's some explaining can be helpful here in terms of what are we? Here we go. What are we talking about with these different terms? People get, it's easy to get confused on when we're talking about xTuple versus xTuple server versus xTuple appliance, and so this little image here is meant to help explain that a little bit. xTuple application is the xTuple ERP software itself, which includes the database and all the clients. So your Postgres database, your desktop client, and the web client are all considered part of the xTuple application. The xTuple server is what Steve is talking about here, and this is the wrapper around the xTuple application that just helps to manage, to install it, to manage the processes, to do backups and all of that. So it's administrative tools wrapped around the xTuple application. And so the xTuple server, when we refer to the xTuple server, we're referring to software. It's just the software toolkit. And then there's a third term which comes up occasionally, which is xTuple appliance, and this is the hardware. You do not need an xTuple appliance to run the xTuple application and xTuple server, but we do offer it as an option where you can buy an appliance that has both that has the server pre-installed, and makes it just make sure that you have a box that's properly provisioned to empowered to handle the xTuple application and server. So that's just I just wanted to bring that up because I think it can be helpful to make sure we're all understanding these words in the same way.
We should have got that picture.
Yeah, I can. We'll stick this picture into the xTuple into this document so everybody can refer to it. All right, back to you, Steve.
Okay, great. Before we go too much further on, does anybody have any questions so far about what either of us have been going over?
You can raise a hand, or you can type a question into the chat, and we'll recognize you.
There's also a
No
questions. There's also a question section too, as well. So in case you guys do have a question, just feel free to type it in there, and we'll field it.
Aha. Molly, do you have a question?
Molly had asked yes before, but that's about it.
Okay, great.
Oh, wait, we have one for Gerhard here. Hold on one moment. How will the commercial version work if the customer already has a hardware server box in place?
Sure.
Or say if they were buying
okay,
a server from Dell, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for providing the lead into my next section, which is that there are a lot of different ways to deploy the xTuple server. As BC said, the xTuple server really is software, and you can deploy it in a lot of different places. So, for example, if you, like in the picture that BC just showed, you can buy an appliance directly from us, and we will set it up and ship it out to you, or your customers, let's say. And the cloud is a great solution for people that are sort of inclined. It is also possible to set it up on sort of the hardware of your choosing, right? So if somebody has just bought like a huge Dell and they don't want to buy another piece of hardware, then it is definitely possible to set up the xTuple server on that machine with a few caveats. First, of course, I would say that it needs to meet the minimum hardware specifications, which is 4 gigabytes of RAM and basically the capacity to run the Ubuntu operating system, which I would say most pieces of hardware can do, but not all of them. And then, one of the reasons why we highlight the appliance as a good option is that there are sometimes quirks with the hardware that make the server difficult to install. And so, what we've decided to do is we allow, if people want to use their own hardware, then xTuple can go in as a consulting engagement and set it up, but we charge pretty much as much money as we would do for that as we would do to just send you a box ourselves, because it can be difficult because we don't know exactly what kind of environment we're getting into. You as partners are probably going to be in a similar boat, which is that if a customer wants you to install an xTuple server on their own machine, then typically it is possible. There's nothing all that special about the xTuple server, other than it does need to run on Ubuntu. And so, if you can run Ubuntu on the piece of hardware and it's got enough memory, then it is possible to transform it into an xTuple server. And the way you do that, let's say if you had a Windows machine, step 1 would be you install Ubuntu on it, and step 2 would be you install the xTuple server on it, and then as far as I'm concerned, it's neither a Windows machine nor really an Ubuntu machine, but it just does xTuple server. There have been a lot of people asking about the capability of setting up the xTuple server on a VM, and it's not something that I recommend people do for mission-critical deployments of the server. That said, it is something you can do, and in fact, we do have some people doing it in production, sort of despite our warnings. The concerns that we have about setting up the xTuple server in a VM are just sort of the straightforward ones, which are that we don't know what's going on in the host machine, if there are viruses on it, if there are loads on it that would sort of impair the running of the xTuple server. It's basically the position of the dev department that if you're going to be running your production environment and your business depends on it, then you deserve a dedicated machine or the cloud, right? And to be honest, the cloud that we use is Amazon's EC2, which is in fact a virtual machine. But Amazon is the most skilled maintainers of virtual machines in the world. And so we're very comfortable running the xTuple server on an EC2 VM. I wouldn't recommend running it on a different VM, but the xTuple server is meant to be portable, and it can be installed pretty much any possible way.
Do you have a section in here, Steve, where you talk about some of the pre-deployment checklist items, like setting up your SSL certificate and your subdomains? That's a good point. Let's see. So let me pull it up.
Hey guys, we had a couple of questions here before you proceed. One is from Joel, and that was, is the xTuple server commercial completely stable to install 4.6.0-1 now? I know there was a pretty big bug yesterday morning and did not allow us to install the xTuple server commercial. And also another one that was affected by installing xTuple 4.6.0-1.
There was a bug yesterday owing to an upgrade of the Node version that we did fix. We are working through a second issue that we hope to get fixed this afternoon. Yeah, I would wait for our go-ahead this afternoon to make sure that that second issue is fixed. I don't think that 460-1 has any problems associated with it. There is, the xTuple app and the xTuple server are sort of two different pieces of software that work together. And just as there are bugs in our code, there are sometimes bugs in the xTuple server. But yeah, to directly answer your question, we fixed the bug yesterday that we were seeing yesterday. We saw a sort of a related bug. Actually, a second bug came up from the same cause, which we are sort of verifying even as we speak. So those of us who are not currently sitting in the room are verifying that bug right now. And I hope that we have it fixed, but we need to confirm it.
So Phil McIntosh has a few questions. I'm going to read the first few. Since you recommend the xTuple server be on a dedicated box, can it be installed directly on the hardware, or does it have to be a virtual machine?
Yeah, so it can and should be installed on bare metal for production purposes. And so, yeah, if you look at the xTuple server setup section, or the quick start, there you see there are two different options. There's setting up a Vagrant VM for sort of training and demonstration purposes. If you want to set someone up for production, you follow our steps to install Ubuntu. And yeah, so you start with whatever computer you have. This has recently been updated to 14.04. We should update that. The first thing you do is you start with a brand new Ubuntu, and then you follow the steps from there.
So, second question from Phil is there anything special about the webmin version you are using in the commercial edition?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not even sure. I guess anecdotally, it looks like we're running webmin version 1.690, but that's an implementation detail that I'm actually not too involved with. We set up webmin to have some custom screens. Right. So this is the way that we leverage Webmin to perform the operations that you need to maintain, to set up and maintain an xTuple server. And really, this is the part of Webmin that you would be using.
So it says, for the third question, links to the commercial xTuple server pages returning 404s.
Yeah, so you need, we just need to give you GitHub access. And so send your, if you don't have a GitHub username, create one. If you have one, send it to, well, actually, Pierce is really the guy that manages GitHub access, so pierce@xtuple.com. Or you can send it to BC or myself, but Pierce is technically the guy who usually does that. Once we add you to our partners team in GitHub, then you all get access to the commercial server.
Okay, and okay, so we got Gerhardt has one question. Will xTuple provide support for us as partners, where xTuple commercial server xTuple's commercial server will be deployed on a customer server? The same type of support we get where we can call in on behalf of our customer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And it'll probably be referred to me for now, but yeah, because Pierce is very well versed on xTuple application, but I would probably be the partner support resource for the xTuple server.
All right, I think that is all of them for now.
Okay, great. So I think to lead back to Gerhardt's question, oh, sorry, we already went over that about the different deployment options. Sort of, again, it's sort of terminology. A point of terminology that might be useful is, we've been talking a lot about the toolkit, which is essentially the part that you would touch of the xTuple server. The core toolkit is basically, it's a set of commands. Here they are. Back up a database, copy a database, destroy, create a new instance, show the status,
rename a database,
rename, restart. These are all commands that you can think about the sort of the Postgres analogs of many of them. However, the commands in the xTuple Server Toolkit also, in parallel, manage the sort of the web components and the other moving parts so that everything works together in concert.
Right. In the past, you would have done almost all of this just in pgadmin. But once you have a mobilized database, once you have an xTuple instance in place that has not just the Postgres database, but also Node and all of the web components for the web stack, you need a more sophisticated tool set to do all of these operations. And so these the operations here on this custom commands page are all of the things that you're normally going to do, that you normally would have done in pgadmin, that you now have to do through the xTuple server. And if you're on the open source version, you'll do them on the command line. And if you're in a commercial version, you have the option to do them here through the Webmin graphical interface.
I would say that this is sort of a technical point, but you can still go into pgadmin, and this, I guess, leads to the next section. pgadmin, you can pretty much still do everything you want to. You used to be able to do with pgadmin. You can go in, you can alter data, you can look at, you can run queries, you can look at records. You can even make a backup using pgadmin, and you can certainly try to restore using pgadmin, but it's not going to. Pgadmin is no longer powerful enough to do everything that needs to be done, and so that restored database, I think the command would work, but it would not be very useful to you, right? And so for the tasks that are available through the toolkit, you really are going to want to use the toolkit. I would say, with the exception of backup, you can always just do a backup from pgadmin, but I would say you might as well just get in the habit of using the toolkit
Yeah, and Steve's right. I mean, pgadmin is still a very useful tool for you. You're going to do all of your ad hoc queries in pgadmin. You're going to, alter data through pgadmin. But one thing you're not going to do most likely, if you want a new instance or a pilot database or something to be accessible via the mobile web client, then you're going to need to do your restores and your new installs through the toolkit.
Or accessible by BI or eCommerce or any other sort of REST integration, which we're sort of building sort of more and more out. Because REST, this is again sort of a digression, but REST has sort of become our preferred tool for integrating with other services. It certainly has become the industry standard, and in comparison, our API schema really isn't as powerful and as modern a way to connect to other services. Okay, so in this document, I detail a bunch of what the xTuple server means and does not mean for the tools that you're used to using for sort of traditional installs, for example, the Updater and XT Connect. In short, you can, if you're not on the xTuple server, then you should just continue using the old tools as before. And we realize that not everyone is going to jump to the xTuple server immediately, and we are not requiring, for example, that people need to be on the xTuple server to get to version 4.7 or 4.8. We don't really have any plans to enforce the xTuple server for people to get the latest releases. In fact, we sort of go out of our way to make sure that the xTuple server code, the upgrade code, is still sort of, we essentially maintain the updater way of doing it, even for core code, even though it's now part of a unified process that involves the xTuple server. But for people that are not on the server, all the old tools should work more or less exactly the same as before. But for the people that are on the xTuple server, in many respects, those tools are not powerful enough to do everything that needs to be done. And that's what the toolkit is for. And the toolkit is something that we've been working really most of the year on, and it is now sort of stable and feature complete enough for us to be comfortable rolling it out, notwithstanding the bug that hit us 2 days ago that Joel alluded to, which I'm hoping we're going to fix today. Just a little bit of, I guess, philosophy around the xTuple server. Coming from the dev department, which is sort of where I chair up. One of the reasons I'm so excited about the xTuple server is that it provides us a way to sort of guarantee the continuous integration of our software. And what that means is that when we're developing code, we are constantly running our entire accumulated test suite against the code that we're developing. And that test suite is done in an environment that is the xTuple server environment. And when QA makes sure that the features do what they want, or what we say they should do, they're doing it in the exact same environment. And when we deploy, when operations deploys or when partners deploy, if they're using the xTuple server, then not only are those operations consistent from place to place, but they're also relentlessly and automatically tested, probably hundreds of times a week. Now, of course, it doesn't prevent bugs from ever happening. So for example, when Node upgraded their version and 2 days ago installs failed, they also failed in our continuous integration environment, and so all of our green check marks turned into red X's. So it doesn't prevent it doesn't totally prevent failure, but what it does do is when we write code that's going to break something, it informs us immediately that we're doing it wrong. And just sort of strictly from an operational point of view, one of the reasons that I'm very excited about this initiative is that it will let us sort of increase the pace of our innovation, and really sort of march the technology forward in such a way as would have been very difficult to do using sort of our previous setup, which involved a lot of manual steps. Okay, the last two more notes before I sort of go back to the questions. Another thing that we take very seriously is security, right? Because our customers' data is really the lifeblood of their business, and one of the things that I've been uncomfortable with a lot of our deployments is that the security is frequently handled by the customer, and it is not something that people tend to worry about if they don't have to worry about it. And so the xTuple server does enforce I guess what I would call a minimum rigor of security that we're comfortable with. That has created some amount of consternation with some of our implementers who are used to doing something a certain way, and and they find that they can't access the database remotely in the way that they had been used to doing it. I mean, that does it does look like a bug, and we've been working through those sorts of issues, and I think we've struck a pretty good balance of convenience versus security, because there is always going to be that trade-off. BC, you can fact check me on this. It's sort of to sum up exactly what our security is on the xTuple server. We do not allow non-SSL access to the database from the outside world, right? You can set it up to have SSL access to the outside world.
The default is no, but yeah, it can't. When you're doing an install, it's you can override that, and so you can allow access via the web as well, or not the web, but via outside the network. Yeah.
Well, you can allow access from outside the network over SSL, and you can also set it up to allow access inside the network without SSL. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's a way to set it up so that there is non-SSL access from the outside world, and the reason that is that it's really horribly insecure, and the data is too important for us not to sort of enforce that level of security. Other than that, we have found that if customers are on networks where the internal IP ranges are not the official internal IP ranges sort of that have been established in the world, then some of those connections can appear to be coming from the outside world, even if they're coming from inside the network, right? And so depending on the quirks of the network, there are sometimes, sometimes extra hurdles owing to the extra security of the xTuple server. But I guess in my view, those hurdles, we've tried to mitigate the inconvenience, but I think they do a lot of good in ensuring that we take responsible security measures in light of the terrifying nature of the rest of the world, and I think we've hit the right balance.
We had a question from Gerhardt.
Okay, so the last.
Sorry, if my customer would run their own server, how would update to xTuple work? Is that handled automatically?
What do you mean by? We're not sure what he means by handled automatically. Basically, for updates to xTuple, if you're running xTuple, no matter where you are, if there is a way you can get us to do updates, it's called XTN, and it's an update service that we provide. It's a subscription service. If you're not a subscriber to the XTN service, then you have to use the tools we provide to do your own updates, and you can use the tools in the xTuple server toolkit to do that.
He said, thanks.
Okay. I guess, another implementation note about getting customers on the xTuple server. To take a step back, the new installs that we're doing for new customers, we just give them the xTuple server by default. In fact, what we do is our typical installation process is we just set them up in the cloud immediately for them to just get running. And we have this policy by which people can be up in the cloud for 30 days for free as sort of a perk to signing up, while we go on site and do all the sort of the necessary work that they would need to do on site if they want an in-site install. Sometimes people really like the cloud and just stay there forever. Sometimes they want to then move their data in-house. One very nice thing about xTuple and about the xTuple server is that it's very portable. So you can move your data, you can move your database from the cloud onto an in-house solution, back up to the cloud if you want. It can't exactly be done in a click of a button, but that installation process is not particularly onerous. Okay, so for new customers, we typically start them out in the cloud, and from there go anywhere is our sort of our catchphrase. For existing customers, if typically people are not all that excited to mess up their server that's been working however it's been working for the past 6 years and install something new unless they have to, right? And so the existing customers that we've had that we've been putting on the xTuple server are customers that are excited about either eCommerce or the web app or the sort of the mobile friendly nature of the web app or potentially BI. And for those people, we have to go through a process of getting their server from their previous sort of iteration of the server to the xTuple server, obviously without having any downtime. And the way we typically go about doing that is we put them up in the cloud for a while. And then sometimes we can either take that same box that they had been using, transform it into an xTuple server. One caveat I should note is that when you transform something into an xTuple server, you must not be attached to anything that's currently on it, right? Like everything will sort of get wiped out, and it will become this sort of fresh install that really only does one thing, which is to serve our app. And so we can either transform the box that they have into an xTuple server, or if they're up due for some new hardware anyway, they can get an appliance, or they can buy their own Dell if they want. It's likely that you guys are going to have to run into this where people are going to want to move from an old system to the new hardware without any downtime. It's also possible if they just want to buy a new box and move over in one weekend from the old box to the new box. The new one's running the xTuple server. Obviously, something you have to pilot. That process is something that we're confident that we do not need to be involved in. We would if they decide to go through the cloud. But this is something that we really want our partners to have expertise in. And we think that you will probably be able to find your own best practices. The xTuple server does provide a lot of functionality out of the box and does sort of force a certain kind of implementation. But those sorts of questions are something that each of you is probably going to have to deal with in the field, and it really does depend on the customer preference. Okay, so the last note for the webinar is sort of the next steps. So so currently we've just given you sort of an overview. The xTuple server is just recently production ready. We have been working on it both sort of internally and with our internal implementers, and really the next frontier is our partners. And so there's this document, there's all of the documentation on the xTuple server and the xTuple server commercial repositories. But really we want to set you up for success. And so we're also developing a training course by which you can view some videos, do some assignments, and then sort of prove that you understand how how to navigate around an xTuple server. We haven't exactly decided on the pricing, or this is going to be sort of something we charge for. but it's definitely going to be free for partners for the rest of the year. And so if you're interested in being one of these sort of early adopters and you want to go through this training course as soon as it's available, and we're working on it right now, I would say send BCRI an email. That's bc@xtuple.com or shackbarth@xtuple.com. To put your marker in for for the first iteration of this training course. The training course is something that we are hoping eventually to fold into xTuple U, which is another initiative that we're very excited about, but which is well beyond the scope of this particular webinar. But suffice it to say, we want to get you guys up to speed, and it's very important for us that you guys get as comfortable as you can using the xTuple server, ideally before you're put in the spotlight. And so we're setting up the training course as a way to make sure that everyone is comfortable. One last note for Joel is that the reports that I'm getting on my phone from the devs upstairs is that we've fixed our final bug on the xTuple server, and so it is, as was last week, is once again sort of ready for new installs, and please hammer away at it.
He had one other question, Steve. He said
that's it for the okay, great.
It said, since the launch of the xTuple server, will the mobile web client still cost our customers $5,000?
Excellent question. The mobile web client is totally free. If you have an xTuple server, and just kind of to reiterate, there are a bunch of different ways to get an xTuple server, some of which you pay for, some of which you don't. So you can be on the cloud, in which case you pay as a software as a service. You can buy an appliance, in which case there's an upfront cost. You can have us or probably one of you set it up as an implementer. Or we've had customers that just read through our documentation and just set the whole thing up themselves, and for them it costs them nothing more than the hardware that they picked out themselves, right? So once you get the xTuple server, you just point a browser at it and you get the web app. There's no setup involved, and as long as you have Chrome installed or Firefox, then the entire web app just comes along with the xTuple server. So the web app, the mobile-friendly web app is totally free.
Yeah, the fee that's on the site refers to it's basically a services engagement. If you wanted us to do the installation and migration for you on your local computer, your local server.
To which he says, "Awesome," which it is. So that's good.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sure you know this, but our edition structure tracks between the web client and the desktop client, and so if you're entitled to manufacturing edition on the desktop client, then those are the extensions that you get in the web client. If you're a Postbooks customer, then you get the Postbooks web client. You just don't have the sort of inventory control and all that stuff. But the web client is a peer to the desktop client as far as you can get it for free and you can just you can run whatever you're entitled to run.
One final note that I would bring up is that pretty much the entirety of information about the xTuple server and the web client and all of that is located on our GitHub project site. There's very little information about this that's on xtuple.org directly. It's all over here on GitHub, and there's an increasing amount of documentation available here. A lot of really helpful information about how to get set up, how to this quick start guide here for how to set up your Ubuntu server to begin with, and then how to install the various layers of the application, go through a bootstrap, npm install, and all of the steps you need to take to prepare your server. All of that is described over here on the GitHub site, and so this is a critical resource for anybody who's interested in this project. Make sure you come over here to xTuple server, and if you are a commercial customer, as Steve brought up earlier, if you're a partner or a commercial customer, you may get access to this xTuple server commercial repo, which has more information as well. And so yeah, this was Joel brought up the question of, I think it was Joel, of the last bug that we were having. It has been resolved. So yeah, it should be installable as of now.
But you can see all of our warts and all the bugs and all the fixes in our issue tracker on the GitHub page. And there's one for xTuple Server and there's another one for xTuple Server Commercial that are unique to the particular features that are in the commercial edition of the server.
And if you're not too familiar with GitHub yet, one of the tricks is when you first load an xTuple or when you first load a GitHub project page, you see a lot of directory information and so on, but the important information is usually down here. So just make sure you scroll down, and then you get to the real rich information about kind of what you should do. This is basically the README for this project, and then there's additional information available on a lot of these projects over here in the wiki. So there's a huge amount of information, a growing amount of information in the xTuple server repository here in the wiki. The quick start guide, information to install Ubuntu, the xTuple way, how to set up your Vagrant VM, questions and information, the install checklist. These are all really useful documents. So make sure you find your way over here and look through this stuff before you before you get befuddled.
And the best place to file incidents if you're having trouble is in the incident tracker in GitHub.
Yeah.
And we are very responsive to these incidents. All right, thanks for coming, everyone. Let us know if you want to take the next step and sign up for the training course. Otherwise, and let us know if you want us to add your GitHub username to access xTuple Server Commercial. And otherwise, thanks for bearing with us. We've been working on this really all year, and we're very excited about sort of what it is right now and what it represents for the future of the company.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you guys for your time. And if you guys need, we'll be putting this up on our YouTube page very soon. So thanks a lot, and we hope you guys have a great day.